Alright guys, so today we'll be upgrading the PS5 hard drive, just because the PS5 does not really come with a hard drive that's spacious enough to store a lot of games. So once you get your PS5, you'll basically find that, well, a lot of the hard drive is already taken up by the operating system and various utilities and stuff, and you'll only be able to get maybe like, I think I only got like 7 games on this before it filled up. I know it comes with a default like 1 terabyte hard drive, but really you can't really fit many games on it because PS5 games take up so much space. So of course you have to expand it. Only a few SSDs will be able to be compatible with the PS5 because it requires a really fast SSD. But this is one of the ones I saw on Amazon that said it was PS5 compatible. Seems pretty popular. It actually says on here PlayStation PS5 compatible, so it better be compatible. It says so on the box here. It's a Corsair MP600 Pro LPX, up to 7100 megabytes read speed. I guess that's important for the PS5, right? It does require a very high read speed, and 6800 megabytes per second write speed as well. So it's a very fast SSD. It's Gen 4 PCIe M2, so make sure you look for the Gen 4 M2 SSDs, and 2 terabytes. So make sure that have a lot of space on these things. And I got this at a discount, but generally these are pretty expensive. So yeah, I think anywhere I got this on. I mean, I used actually my my Amazon card to get a discount on this, but probably 150, 200 bucks is probably what you expect to be paying for some of these hard drives. I mean, it is 2 terabyte SSD, so it's, yeah, that's a lot of space, but they're fairly expensive because they're very high speed. So yeah, the Corsair MP600 Pro LPX is what I'll be using. So yeah, let's check it out actually. Okay. Okay. So you get a QR code, and yeah, this is the SSD itself. It's a pretty thick SSD because it has a heat sink on it, so it has a heat spreader or heat sink on top of it. That's because it stores a lot of space, 2 terabytes, and it's very fast. So yeah, you need to have a SSD, a heavy duty SSD like this thing, 2 terabytes and very fast read and write speeds. So that's what I'll be adding. Okay, so now it's time to take apart the PS5, and I believe how I do this is just this disk drive is facing this way, right? It's facing the front, and it's the side opposite or diagonally opposite of the disk drive back here. So what I have to do is I kind of have to like pop this out and kind of move this way at the same time, like this. There, like that. So then it pops off quite easily after that. And then yeah, and then this is the inside of the PS5. Okay, so I believe this is the slot where the extra hard drive goes, where the SSD goes, and this is the second SSD slot. The main one, of course, is the one that stores the operating system and everything. And I'm not going to touch that one, but I do want to add an extra SSD. So it'll be this one that we're looking at, and this is where our handy dandy Corsair MP600 Pro SSD would go. Alright, so what's interesting is that yeah, there are some slots for some screws here, but I don't have the screws, and Sony doesn't provide the screws for these, which is weird. Oh, wait, is it this one? The screw here, I see. Maybe it's this screw I have to use? They don't provide you with any screws then for the SSD slot, but I do see this one. Maybe this is the one that you have to use. Yeah, they do give you this one screw that's kind of screwed at the top. Maybe you have to use this one. So I guess the reason for that is maybe they have like a few different SSD slots. So yeah, you can see like this is all to accommodate different lengths of an M2 SSD. So for mine, I'm gonna need the 80, I believe. So by default, there's a screw in the 110 millimeter, I'm guessing. So I'm going for the 80 millimeter then. All right, so we'll just pop this one in, and then I'll just use this one that was previously on the 110. Yeah, and actually, what is this? Oh, okay, that's this extra washer. I think will fit. I'm not sure if the extra washer will fit. Let's try putting it there. Okay. Let's try to screw it in. Okay, so that's it. Just installing the Corsair SSD here. PS5. It's actually fairly simple. A lot simpler than I expected, honestly. It's simpler than doing it on the PS4, I think, as well, which I did before on my PS4 Pro. Yep, that's it. And then close that up. We'll slide this back in. Yeah, I think that's it. That's it for installing an extra hard drive on the PS5. It's as simple as that. Just adding it in, and then it'll be available to for you guys to install games onto. So it's an extra 2 terabytes, which is, I think, pretty crucial to install an extra SSD, because by default it only comes with enough space for like 7 to maybe 10 games if you have smaller games, but it won't be more than that because it really doesn't come with enough space. PS5 games are usually pretty big, so yeah. So that's, we're now done adding extra space to the PS5. All right. Now there's another thing I want to upgrade, also gaming related. So let's upgrade that component as well. Okay, so next we have to replace the hard drive on my Alienware M15 R5 gaming laptop because the SSD on this died, unfortunately. So in the BIOS it does not detect the main SSD anymore, so it won't even boot up. So we have to replace it. And what's interesting is when I was looking online about the hard drive here on the main SSD, it's actually a very interesting M2 SSD. It's a very small form factor SSD. It's called a 2230. So it's not very common. I think most of the M2 SSDs like 2242, 2280, 2230 is not very common. It's a very special small form factor M2 SSD, as you can see here. So it's generally a little bit more expensive. So this 512 gigabytes, yeah, this still costs me like $150, even though it's 512 gigabytes, because it's a very unique form factor. So yeah, usually like for 150 bucks you can easily get 1 terabyte if it's another bigger form factor, like the longer one, which is standard. But since this one's so small, it costs a little bit more money, unfortunately. But that's how Alienware is. I mean, it has a special, for some reason, it has to use a special form factor, smaller size SSD, which is normally used in like a Steam Deck or something. So that's what they use as their main SSD. And it's different from their secondary SSD. The secondary SSD is a normal like 2242, I believe. It's just because I remember adding the secondary SSD, and it's just a normal like 2242 long one, M2. But for some reason, their main SSD in the slot 1 is a 2230. So it's a special, this size, this small size SSD. So this particular one is made by Samsung. So there isn't like a whole lot of makers of these, I think. But yeah, I think the Alienware comes with probably a Hynix or a Samsung. We'll see. But yeah, we just have to do this stuff here. Okay, we don't have to take these screws out, just loosen it enough. I think that's enough, and then we can kind of just use our fingernails, apply them on the side. I can also use a flathead as well. I can do that. So I can use a flathead, just kind of chip along the side here. Get this thing open. This side as well. there's still something tied in. Let's see. Oh, he's still refusing to budge. There we go. I think there's still something loose. There we go. Now it comes off. Okay. Okay, so here we go. So I believe this is the one I installed previously. I believe this is a standard 2242. So this is the secondary SSD slot. Oops. Yep. So if you move the heat shield here, yep, heat shield's actually another screw we got to remove here. Okay. So yeah, this is the one I added before. It's a 500 gig Samsung SSD. This is a 980. This is a 980, and this is a standard form factor. So yeah, this is your standard, more long length form factor M2 SSD. It's the more common one, right? You're a 2280 or something. Yeah, so this is the secondary SSD slot right here. So that's where I installed the secondary one. And this one, it still works fine, I think. So it shouldn't be any issues with this one. So just put it back in here. Be careful. There, slide back in. Put the heat shield back on. This one back here. Okay. So then it's actually this one that's a more interesting one. This is the first M2 slot, and it's a special form factor 2230. So move this one. And oh, there's another one here. two screws. Yep, okay. Let's see what this is. And yep, this is a very interesting small form factor SSD here. The same kind they would use for like a Steam Deck or something. Yep, so this is yeah, I believe this is a SK. But actually these are both pretty much the same. You know, Samsung. They're both Samsung. So yeah, Samsung's like one of the few manufacturers that make these small types 2230. But yeah, this is about the same size as the Wi-Fi chip, actually. See the Wi-Fi chip? The killer 1650X Wi-Fi chip here? Same size as the Wi-Fi chip. So this is a very nice, well, it's a very special small form factor SSD. I really haven't had much experience with these small ones, but you gotta use these small ones, so there we go. Okay, slot that back in. All right, and then, oh, let's see for these ones. Oh, we gotta put the heat shield back on. There we go. Okay, yeah. Alright, so that's pretty much it. That's replacing the main SSD of the Alienware M15 R5, which is a small form factor M2 SSD, a 2230. Very unusual, but that's what they use. That's pretty much it. I'll replace the back cover again. So one thing is, because this is a primary SSD, not a secondary, I also have to reinstall the operating system, which means you gotta have a USB key with Windows and stuff booted from it. Just boot it into the USB key from the BIOS, and then basically reinstall the operating system from there. So because this is a primary hard drive, you got to do that. It's a little bit more complicated than this with the secondary. Alright, that's pretty much it. That's replacement of the primary SSD on the Alienware M15. So that's it. Next step is formatting the hard drive and reinstalling the operating system, and yeah, we're ready to go again.